Carron joins us now from Atlanta. Carron, thanks so much for being with us. You write about this week's admissions scandal, saying, quote, "For some, it was shocking and eye-opening. For others, it was like watching an open secret finally getting said aloud." Explain why there was such different reaction to this story.
If you just paid attention to what happened on social media alone, it was just this whole conversation where people were just taken aback. They were shocked that something like this could happen in America, could happen at our colleges and universities, institutions where we think our best and brightest are supposed to go and get educated. But if you're a person of color, or if you're just someone who's been maybe a conspiracy theorist all along, this really didn't surprise you. I wasn't surprised by this. If we look at the way colleges let students in, even if you look at how some schools have legacy clauses where, if your grandparents or your parents went here, or if they're big donors, you have a better chance of getting in. Even that can raise some eyebrows if you really think about how that system is set up. So for people like myself, I wasn't surprised. But for others, they were really shocked and taken aback by what we found out this week and everything that's still being reported.
And you spoke with the executive director of the University of Southern California Race and Equity Center. USC is one of the schools named in the admissions scandal. What did he reveal about race and wealth when it comes to the admissions process?
My conversation with him was very eye-opening because, he has some very poignant stats telling me about the percentage of college admissions, people who are over the programs, the directors, and the racial backgrounds. And when you think about how many people of color, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern, Hispanic, get into schools compared to white students, and then you look at who's over those programs and who gets the final say on who gets admitted and who doesn't, it raises some eyebrows. And you have to talk about diversity and inclusion, not just on your student enrollment and who you're letting into your schools, but also the decision makers and their racial background and why and who is, picked to make those decisions on who gets into school and who doesn't.
And on that point, the USC official says more than 80% of college admissions officials are white. Do we know specifically what role does that play in college admissions?
Not necessarily specifically, but it does give you a reason to take pause and say, okay, if 80% of college admissions directors are white, what is that saying? Do you not believe that other races can do this job? Do you just believe that these are the only people on earth that have the expertise and the knowledge to allow students into college and universities? Like, this is a bigger conversation in itself, which needs to be examined. And this whole college admissions system, as we see, we need way more transparency. And then you also have to earn the trust back. If you're a USC or a UCLA or a Yale or a Penn or whatever schools that have been involved in this, and maybe even more that come in the future, I'm really interested to see how the education system as a whole tackles this and what the future will look like.
Well, this scandal comes a year after another FBI probe hit the NCAA. Remind us again what happened there and what's happening now with the investigation.
This is Selection Sunday. This is one of the biggest days of the year for college basketball, and everyone's excited. But if we go back to the beginning of last year, even before last college basketball season started, is when the FBI investigation trickled down. And it really started with the Brian Bowen case at the University of Louisville, where we basically found out that Adidas paid his father close to, I believe it was $100,000 for his services for his son to get admitted to that school. And since then, it's just been bombshell after bombshell with shoe companies, with schools, with coaches, with players losing eligibility, coaches getting fired, and a couple more coaches on the hot seat. Because basically for the last couple of years, the FBI had wiretaps, they had text messages, they had screenshots, they had everything. And the system that we know and love from one of my favorite sports as a sports writer has just been blown up as we're trying to figure out and see who's all implicated. And there's still more stuff coming down the pipeline.
And yet you write that you see positive change being possible after the NCAA scandal, but not in the admissions controversy. Why?
Because in the NCAA basketball schedule, there are changes coming. For instance, the one and done rule, we feel is on its way out. It may have just 1 or 2 more years left. they've made some great changes on allowing in the future, I believe next season, letting some of the top prospects in basketball have agents, letting them be able to test the draft waters and then come back to school. So there are some real changes that may sway some of this. And then also looking into the shoe companies and the relationships between schools and university. So we've seen some very progressive, quick acting things happening with college basketball. But with this, with college admissions, like, where does it stop? Does this even happen at junior colleges, at community colleges? We've been deeming that this has happened at the elite universities. But what about the schools that may not be elite? This can also be going on there. So this is a whole nother can of worms. And I feel like this is going to go on for a while because there are just so many different levels and so many different schools and colleges, universities in this country that this may have been taking on, that maybe the FBI just wasn't focusing on those schools, but it could also still been happening.
So critical to examine the systems and these processes that are in place. Carron J. Phillips. Carron, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Elaine.